Hey, party people, welcome to this week's Money News in Human Words. Look, the first thing that I thought I'd unpack this week is the meltdown happening over in the UK. You guys have probably seen a bit of the headlines around this, but there's a lot going on. Essentially, like started with some insane inflation over there, getting up to like 13% is the expected headline inflation, and government really scrambling off the back of that to avoid the deepest recession ever seen in the UK. So old mate Bojo has been unceremoniously punted, and there's a new government in play, and their first big flex was to issue a new budget to get things back on track. But the budget involved a ton of tax cuts and measures to stimulate the economy, so to avoid essentially them going into a recession, which sort of sounds like a good idea. The only problem is, though, that the economy over there was already in the red enormously. So the budget was in a massive deficit, and the growth was slowing right down. And essentially that means that all of the measures that they've come out and put into place, they're all cost the government more money, and the government has to borrow money to fund those cuts. And so when they did that, the big bond markets over there basically just sort of went into shock and froze up. The central bank had to then step in and start buying up bonds to create like liquidity in the market to make sure that the markets didn't fully seize, which would be a major problem. And it's left the government sort of backpedaling now. They initially came out saying that they were going to stand behind the measures that were there, but they've just come out this morning and said that they're going to reverse part of the tax cuts, specifically that they were going to cut the top rate of income tax. It seems that they're backpedaling pretty hard. There's definitely some serious pain ahead, and I think many people, with this being the first big move by the new government, are really questioning, whether they're up to the challenge of steering the economy through this super difficult period. One silver lining, I suppose, for Aussies in particular, is that there's never been a better time to travel to the UK because their pound is in the tank. So cheap buying of the pound at the moment on currency markets. So if you want to travel over the UK, or if you're a UK expat and keen to get back to see your family, then now's the time to do that. In a similar vein, the next piece I wanted to cover was off the back of this opinion piece from Paul Krugman, who's a super respected economist over in the US. He talked about whether the Federal Reserve in the US, but broadly where the central banks around the world are putting the brakes on too hard on the economy, and essentially talking about the fact that like when interest rates rise, it typically takes a while for the effect of those rises to filter through into spending. If the interest rates go up this month, it takes a while for the banks to pass on those cuts, takes a while for the people to feel the pain, takes a while for people to realize that, hey, actually my mortgage repayments have gone up and my debt repayments have gone up, so I should be spending a little bit less money. Now, Paul's analogy was that it's essentially like driving a car that's in heavy traffic, where the car in front of you accelerates a bit, you jam on the accelerator to catch up, but then it brakes and you have to jam on the brakes, and creates a little bit of danger because you can end up rear-ending the car in front of you. And in the US, they've increased interest rates at a faster rate than even Australia, up 3% already this year. And talking about the fact that it will take a while for that to actually be felt across the economy. We have seen some impact on inflation, and it's a similar story in Australia. We've seen some impact, but it will take some time for these things to filter through. But in the US, unlike Australia, households already had really low rates of saving, so they don't have the same buffer. In Australia, we've got these big war chests for the most households have been saving strongly through the pandemic, which puts us in a strong position to absorb interest rate rises without it really massively slowing down the economy, or without it slowing down the economy as much as it would if you didn't have any money in the bank, because you've got a bit of a stash that you can draw on if you need to pay a bit more at the petrol pump, or cover your mortgage payments and still spend a little bit of money on the side. Now, this opinion piece was saying that he thinks it's absolutely going to lead to a slowdown, which obviously will interest rates going up 3%, but potentially going to lead to a recession. My take on this is that it seems likely that the central banks are being aggressive to get inflation under control and set people's expectations around inflation that they are going to keep going so that inflation will go back to their normal range. But if history is any sort of indicator as to how the central banks have gone, they probably do too much and then have to unwind things quite quickly. It also, in my view, creates an opportunity because the Australian dollar at the moment is at a really low point, the lowest point that it's been for a lot of years, and it's likely that our economy will recover faster than it will over in the US. And when economies start going better, then our dollar will start strengthening. And if their dollar is weakening, then that creates an investment opportunity to invest in things that benefit when the Australian dollar strengthens against the US dollar. So yeah, it's something to look out for anyone looking to make investment moves at the moment. Shifting gears, talking property, and the first one is the Palaszczuk government canning their amendments to land tax, which they came out basically saying that they were going to be taxing people that own property in Queensland, even when they owned in properties in other states, which historically land tax is a state-based tax based on the amount of land that you own in each state. This tax was stated to raise about $20 million in revenue and affect 10,000 people. But what it actually did by Palaszczuk announcing this, that it created a huge amount of uncertainty in the Queensland property market. A lot of people really annoyed that they were going to be taxed on holdings in other states, which is really uncommon. They had this big national cabinet meeting just over the last week, and basically the premiers, Dominic Perrottet, the New South Wales premier, came out and said that he just refused to share data on New South Wales residents, which I thought was interesting. We also saw the Victorian state government saying that they're not happy about the impact of this on their constituents, basically, and Palaszczuk finally pulled the pin. Now, that's welcome news for a lot of property investors and essentially means that Queensland's back in business when it comes to investment properties. Good news for people in Sydney and Melbourne, because the property market is definitely much more affordable on the East Coast. There's still got strong population growth scheduled in or projected in Brisbane and around Queensland Gold Coast as well. And it means, they're essentially back in business. Staying on the property vein, and median rents are on the rise, or massively on the rise. Across the country, median rents have surged by more than $100 per week across 35 different markets in the 12 months to the end of August, as the supply is tightening in the residential property market. This is all based on data from CoreLogic. The suburb with the highest weekly rental increase was Rose Bay in Sydney's eastern suburbs, which has average rent up $378 per week, which is 22.3%. over the year, followed by Roseville, Chase, Linfield, and Roseville. They're all up $241, $221, $211 respectively. Also, its houses are probably seeing more increases for rental gains, but units are also on the rise. Nationally, unit rents increased by 11.3% over the 12 months to the end of August. So this is happening across all states: Sydney, Melbourne, Brisbane, and Adelaide, hitting their highest levels of rental growth that's ever been recorded, up somewhere between 10 and 12% across each of those markets. We also saw in Brisbane and Adelaide house price rents increased between 12 and 14%. And look, sort of no surprises in that the rental vacancy rate has declined to 0.9%, so less than 1%, which is the lowest level in over a decade and a half. But there are some signs that the growth, at least the acceleration in the increase in rents, is increasing as housing affordability takes its toll. Now, the rental increases eased from 2.8% in the 3 months to May to 2.2% in the 3 months to the end of August. So it's slowing down. It is still way on the up, but at least it's slowing. So that's a good sign. Some markets are softening, with Canberra, Hobart, Tasmania, all down between 0.5% or so. Also, regional Northern Territory, regional South Australia, and regional Tasmania are also down around 0.5% in each of those markets as well. So a little bit of welcome news, if you're in those areas and the regions. The biggest suburbs, and I was interested in this, that the suburbs with the biggest growth in rental, we see Point Turton in Southern Australia is topping the list at a massive 34% rental increase. Undulla in Queensland, 23%. Bincheno in Tasmania, Woodend in Queensland, Rose Bay in New South Wales, Jacobs Well, Ipswich, Glenelg East, South Hurstville, Brighton Sands, and Lugano, last three in New South Wales, they're all up between 20 and 25%. Lugano up 19%. So some massive rises there. And yeah, look, it's no wonder that people are struggling. There is some, I suppose, partly welcome news in that this ties in with giving the RBA a bit less of a case to keep on this push for interest rates. So if you could take the silver lining, obviously it doesn't help too much if you're the one having to shell out for this rent, but yeah, there is some impact there. Also, in property news, we saw the number of suburbs where property prices, the average property price is above $1 million has jumped by 18.9% in the last 12 months. Basically, Blacktown is leading the list of 178 new suburbs where the average property price is above $1 million. Again, this is from CoreLogic data that just got released for the end of August. It shows that there's now 1,120 suburbs around the country where the median prices are above $1 million, which, is basically what's happening is that we're seeing the suburbs that are closer to the central business districts in Sydney, Melbourne, Brisbane, but in Sydney as the most expensive market in the country, that they increase first, and it's now sort of rippling out to the outer rings. So we're seeing, Blacktown, Upper North Shore, Outer West, and the Southwest, that those areas are now seeing this $1 million prices, mainly for houses, although it's across the whole market, but mainly for houses, driven by the massive increase that we saw in demand for bigger places through the pandemic. This calling out that these numbers include the price softening off the back of the recent interest rate rises in Australia. So the average median value across these suburbs is $1,069,000, which means that prices would need to decline by another 6.5% for the average to be knocked back below the $1 million mark. Now, I think that while the pandemic is like sort of overish, I think Biden said that the pandemic is over, that the impact on the property market is here to stay. Flexible working arrangements in workplaces are not likely to go anywhere in the near term. And that means that these bigger properties in particular are likely to hold their value well through market conditions over the next little while. My last piece for this week was from this piece showing some data from Employment Hero, who are a massive HR services company that do things like process payroll. And through that work, they collect a heap of data. What they found is that they saw on their end that their average wages were growing much faster than the official statistics from the ABS. Now, they process over 1 million payroll for over 1 million people. So they've got a really large sample size, and they're seeing that average jump in average wage of 8.6%, which compares to the ABS data showing only 2.6% increase. Now, this is something that I've definitely noticed. We've been hiring over the last 12 months, and I've seen that even for our entry-level roles, more senior roles, that the expectations in the market have certainly increased. And I think that if the impact of this, if wages are increasing faster than what the ABS statistics are actually showing, it's probably a bad sign for inflation, because as people's wages increase, it's a welcome sign for the people receiving the pay rises. But when then people have got more money, then they can afford to pay more for the prices of stuff. So that means that, again, more fuel to the fire, the RBA to keep rising interest rates. Now, calling out that with this data, it is it's like a smaller sample size. It's not the whole economy, and there could be explanations for the data being skewed. For example, if a company starts hiring a lot more senior people on higher average salaries, then that's going to throw out their average salary rate. But given the size of this difference and the size of the sample being 1 million people, it probably leaves more questions than answers. Guys, that's it for me for this week. Stay safe out there, and I will catch you next time.